Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to those of you who have been here for the first part of our conversation that Josh Kornbluth and I had last week. My name is Menachem Creditor. I'm the rabbi here at Congregation Netivot. Shalom. By show of hands, just raise your hand, were you here last week? Wonderful, hands down, thank you. And if this is the first time that you're here for this part of for this conversation, just raise your hand. Great. Okay, that's really great because it tells us, number one, that we can have sort of a continuation of the conversation, and it also helps us frame what we need to do. So, by way of introduction, Netivot Shalom is a conservative synagogue in Berkeley, California. For those of us watching on YouTube, that's helpful information. We are 25 and a half years old as a synagogue, and we pride ourselves on inclusion and pluralism and tradition, and just a wonderful hybrid of things. So welcome. Hopefully this won't be your last time here, and you out in YouTube world, welcome. Come visit. We are very proud, Josh and I are very proud to be part of a conversation that isn't easy to have. And this was a plan that we had 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, to convene a conversation, and then, given the events of the last few weeks in Israel and in Gaza, the intensity of the conversation grew exponentially. And so what we mean to do is have a very specific kind of conversation. All of you hopefully have a handout. What I'd like to do is review for you the outline of what we're going to do this evening and the rules of the conversation. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to welcome us, go over the rules, then Josh is going to share an opening reflection. I'll then share an opening reflection. Josh and I will share a conversation. Then there'll be chavruta time, chavruta meaning dialogical conversation. You and one or two people near you, really just listening and talking, hopefully modeling what we are going to aspire also to model for anyone who might take a whiff of what a real conversation looks like. And then there'll be a closing reflection from Josh, and then a closing reflection from me. Before I go into the rules, I do want to share that after last week's conversation, which we were very, very moved to have, and Josh and I spent about 3 hours after everyone left just being together and processing what the conversation meant in our hearts, let alone for the world around us. We each received numerous emails and Facebook messages and tweets and maybe even real connections with people where people said, well, that's not really why I came. The full range of opinions in the room wasn't represented, and we might actually have solutions to the problem, which we heard each of those things, and also very specific questions in reaction to the comments that Josh and I had. So what I want to be clear about is that this is not the entire conversation about Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian people and Palestine that needs to happen. This is a specific kind of conversation where Josh and I will talk to each other, and we hope that you will too. But it's a chavruta model where two people, it's a very traditional Jewish model of two people looking each other in the eyes and listening well. To have a conversation with an entire room of people would be quite powerful, perhaps quite needed, but not what we're setting out to do tonight. And so should you wish to do that, I encourage you to organize that. If you'd like to organize that and have this be a venue for that conversation, please talk to me after we're done tonight. There's no limit to the kind of conversations we could have. Tonight's is a very specific one. The ground rules for tonight's conversation go as follows. If your position is that Israel should cease to exist as the Jewish homeland, that is not the conversation we are going to have. If you believe Jews are better than Palestinians, that is not the conversation we are going to have. If you believe that only Jews have the right to a state, that is not the conversation we're going to have. If you believe Israel's concerns about security are imagined, that is not the conversation we're going to have. Within that, well, this is the conversation we're going to have. And just as we opened up as a faith community with a prayer last week, the same prayer I'll offer, and again, I don't presume any uniformity of belief, but I do presume a universal acknowledgement of human dignity. And so, unfortunately, there are more people as of this week that needed this kind of sentiment than did last week. And you can think of which corner of the globe, near or far, because they both are in desperate need, you would like to incline your heart. And so I'll offer this, not in your name, but I'll offer these thoughts with all of our hearts in my mind, at least. And if you feel like saying amen when I'm done, you're certainly welcome to. This is called the Mother's Prayer, written by Shicha Ibtisam Mahmoud and Rabbi Tamar Elad Abdullah. God of life, You who heal the brokenhearted, binding up our wounds, please hear this prayer of mothers. You did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear or rage or hatred in your world. You created us so that we would allow each other to sustain your name in this world. Your name is life. Your name is peace. For these I weep, my eye sheds water, for our children crying in the night, for parents holding infants, despair and darkness in their hearts. For a gate that is closing, who will rise to open it before the day is gone? With my tears and with my constant prayers, with the tears of all women deeply pained at these harsh times, I raise my hands to you in supplication. Please, God, have mercy on us. Hear our voice that we not despair, that we will witness life with each other, that we have mercy for each other, that we share sorrow one with the other, that we hope together. Inscribe our lives in the book of life. For your sake, our God of life, let us choose life. For you are peace. Your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. May this be your will, and I will say, Amen. Only a half word to describe Josh Kornbluth. Many of you know him through his work. I want to share just one aspect of his work that you might or might not know of. In addition to being a voice for justice and democracy and art and humor and life in the world, he has also been working at Zen Hospice. If you believe in the dignity of life at its end, you also have a lot to learn from my friend Josh, as do I. Josh,
thank you. I was telling Menachem, I just had my shift, one of my shifts at the Zen Hospice, and as a volunteer, and there's a woman there, Kate, who is near the end of her life with breast cancer, and I really dig her. I really know her. And so anyhow, I said, and then it's hard for me to turn myself away at the end of my shift. But I said, look, I have to go talk to a rabbi about Israel. I'm not being euphemistic. Like, I'm actually going to talk to a rabbi about it, and it's not like an excuse I just made up. It'd be a really weird excuse for leaving. I really am talking to a rabbi about Israel. So I said, so give me some sugar, So I gave her a hug. And then she's been like fading, she's been fading, but I gave her the hug, and I was turning to go, and she said, Josh, wait, that's not enough of a hug. Come on, give me a better hug than that. You represent Israel. And so I do. And then, Menachem, I guess, will have to be the anti-Israel, as I understand it, the way in a debate. I love Israel. You love Israel. I'm a proud American Jew. As I talked about last week, it's been a traumatic and painful thing to me not to be able to have dialogue about Israel and related matters with other American Jews. There have been generally in two camps until I met you. This is like always a love story with me and Menachem. So until I met you, Menachem, really there were just two kinds, right? And there was the kind of basically, and this is what I still am, but was before also. I was someone, to me, the Palestinians represent what it is that Jews are and who Jews should support. That has always been, they're the ones that are disenfranchised, they're out of power, they're suffering. There are all of these things, and not only that, but as I shared last week also, which I'm now 55, so I can't blame them for anything, but my parents really didn't like Israel, so I was sort of raised without any love for Israel whatsoever. And so I developed this love, as I described last time as well. But so there's this one side of well, this is what being a Jew is. Being a Jew to me, being a proud Jew, progressive, for justice, for dialogue, engagement, and work in that it's not just your thoughts, it's your deeds. It's not just your ideas. It has to be expressed in your works. And so that's that's always, and before I even was bar mitzvahed and came here, I mean, I was proud to be a Jew for that, and I was very proud of the American Jews' participation and great involvement in the civil rights movement in the South, including my father, who had a gun held to his head by Klansmen when he was down to register, they were, for some reason, black voters weren't being counted where Dad was in the South. And so I've always been very proud of that. And then this Israel thing happened. I mean, I was, as I say, I come from a point where I didn't previously care about. I now care a great deal. Actually, I hugely care about Israel. I found a connection with Israel through studying with you and through reading, especially about its founding. And its founding, the document, the actual thing that was said at the thing. But you know what I mean. The Declaration, right. Declaration, which is just like beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like Jewish, progressive, wow, great. And then I think, wow, these are people like, I mean, God forbid my parents should have founded a nation, but these are people like my parents, who founded a nation, they're other, like they're from the shtetl and from the assimilated world, and then they came, and they, socialists who started this, but I mean, God forbid I should have to live in it, because we visited it, and they just don't have good coffee. I mean, just where we're at. I'm not the stuff of a settler, but what I'm saying is that I'm like, wow, that's really great. I really love that. So I'm reading about Zionism, Judaism, and stuff, and then I'm also reading like, well, the Zionists were like warning from the 1800s, were warning that Jews would never be saved, that they needed their own land. This has been proven, right? So they were right, they were right, and then I also I read about Zionists as like my people, from the old world, and like you have in the shtetl, you have in the community, you have the socialists and the communists and the labor and the Bund and the Zionists, and then you have all this. Arguing among family. You have this idea, you have a beautiful, fascinating marginal people who are dealing with their fate, and dealing with their fate. I just want to object to that as if that was a comment on me to turn off myself. Okay, cool. It was a little loud. Is that just because I always talk really loud? I'm really loud now, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that comment. Okay. I have to be told in the restaurant by my wife, said, "You're shouting." So really, I was whispering. This is a combination of both being a performer and having gone to see a Violent Femmes concert that was too loud in 1983. This is what the combination does. So, and I'd like that time back. Okay, so, no, I can't get it back because we only have this amount of time. So you have all these people and they're arguing, so now I get this sense, okay, so Israel, it's not just this foreign thing to me, it's not just this thing that my father's parents who hate him and he hates, love. The ones who went to Miami Beach, love. The ones who, when I went to visit them, they kept saying my father is a very stupid man, and I ended up having to leave. And that was my association a little bit with Israel and Zionism, a little bit. And then there's AIPAC, and just my experience of just growing up in the world, being an adult in this world after, I guess now I realize after 73 maybe, when, as I've read in the great Shavit book that you recommended, I've read that there was this near loss of Israel, and the labor lost its hold, and then you have a bunch of your Netanyahu type people who started running things, and then you have AIPAC, who always seems to say no matter what that government says, no matter what they do, no matter who they invade, or how they attack, no matter what, it's always right. And if you don't agree with me that it's right, you are an anti-Semite, and if you're a Jew, you're really an anti-Semite, and you're a disgusting, lower than scum kind of person. I'm paraphrasing, but really, but not a whole lot. There is an absence of dialogue. So I performed at Theater J, right? I went to perform at Theater J, which is the theater at the Jewish Community Center in Washington, D.C. And then there's a play that they want to have that's based on research about some bad things that were done to Palestinians in Israel, where they were kicked out, and then we're going to defund. We're going to, this is like, this establishment Jewish idea that you cannot talk, you cannot argue, you cannot debate. And that if you do debate, that you are absolutely and utterly, that you're absolutely and utterly on the wrong side, and that you want us all to, I mean, it's toxic. And it is, and so what really has been a great thing to me, among many other things, and I haven't wondered, I was talking to my little brother Sam on the train, and he said, I've just been watching the YouTube from last week. He said, Josh, believe me, you and Menachem have established you love each other. You really don't need to reestablish that. He said that was a half hour. So, stipulated, we love each other. Okay. But there's, one of the really great things to me is I met you, right? And you don't break down in the same ways that I'm used to, in that you are totally progressive in all the things that I care about, right? All the things I care about gay rights, about women's rights, about civil rights, about all of these things. And you're also a passionate defender of Israel in a way that, to me, initially resonated with what I had gotten from AIPAC. And what I'm saying is that that's only a part of it. But one part of it is that I felt like, especially when Israel is under attack, which is, kind of always, but I mean now, they're literally under attack at this moment, right? When that happens, it is, as you say, your family. And you are acting and behaving as a feeling person would if his own family were being attacked. That is absolutely right. If my family is being attacked, I'm not able to be rational. I'm not even rational. I just want to kill. I want to kill her because I just want to get out, save them, go away, go right. And to me, you sometimes get into, or I get from you, some of the things, especially like when you were reporting from AIPAC, like when you go to AIPAC, say, well, it's really great here. It's like, and you told me about AIPAC, and I'm now really interested in AIPAC, and as I told you, I'm willing to join AIPAC. I'd like to get a deal on the radio. Because I think most of the people in AIPAC, which I've heard about the Jews, in fact, and that was weird, that we control the banks, it's like, really? Really? I mean, that would be awesome. So, I digress there, but what I'm saying is that, like, there are some things where people object to things, or people are expressing their sadness, their rage, their anger at Israel, at the Israeli government and at the Israeli military, for what people perceive as the military and the government doing things that are not right. In fact, doing things that are as wrong as can be wrong. And now, as I have learned and as I will continue to learn, there are layers and layers and layers and layers behind this story. From reading Ari Shavi, this is what I believe. I believe that Israel needed to happen. I believe that it needed to happen, and I'm proud of Israel, and I'm thrilled that it's there. And I want to protect it, and I want to nourish it. I also believe, and had confirmed from reading Ari Shavi, who's a very loving, patriotic Israeli, that in the process of creating Israel, many, 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 many Palestinians were forcibly dispossessed. Many Palestinians were killed, many Jews were killed, many Israelis were killed. It is a tragic situation in this incredibly sacred place to more than one group of people. And a home that is a home to more than one group of people. There is no totally happy answer to it. There is only, from what I can tell, the answer of negotiation, and the answer which itself requires that you have two negotiating parties that trust each other, etc. But what I'm talking about, or what I'm thinking about, is, for example, in Gaza, when children are killed on a beach. I do not know what those circumstances were. It is my instinct that those children did not need to be killed on the beach. It is my total belief that Hamas made a horrible situation that Israel had to defend itself from. Hamas is attacking. Hamas is terrible. Before I came here, I cut off my membership in Hamas. It had crossed the line for me, know, you get really good deals on stuff, but it's just, I just said no. But I think I understand that. Hamas sucks. Hamas is terrible. And so are, by the way, to me, so are terrible are the ultra-right-wing Israelis who, disparagingly being a very polite term for it, treat Palestinians and Arabs. So it's this horrible situation. And then these horrible things are happening. You are defending Israel. I want to join you in defending Israel. When you are defending Israel, sometimes you speak in anger of people at demonstrations against what Israel is doing. And you say, well, what are they talking about? What are they doing, these people who are criticizing? And now here's the thing we have to separate. Some of those people are anti-Semites, like a bunch, right? Are anti-Semites, but a lot of them, like me, are not anti-Semites. We believe in justice. We are proud of being Jews. I now am proud. I'm proud of Israel. I'm proud when Israel wins the luge. I'm just making that up. It's probably not going to happen, but almost everything else they can win. I'm proud of all that. I'm proud of just how beautiful they are, just physically hot. You know, it's just because really, in my family, we have personality, but the Israelis, you know. So I get all that. And I guess what I want is a way for us to be progressive Jews together, defending Israel together. And I also want to communicate to you that I think there are a lot of people, Jewish and not Jewish, who have been and are critical of the behavior of the Israeli government and of the Israeli military, who are themselves your friends, who are themselves people who we all need to be part of the same thing. And that is if I can do that, and so that's why I have this experience. I don't know if you guys, but when I'm reading your many posts, right, on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, I read every single one. I even have a sound, an alert that goes off. Okay, so it's a lot. And I read it and then I go, yes, oh great, oh my God, oh geez, Menachem, no, really, no, yes, and then there are like those things where I'm going, oh no, are things where I feel like you're treating people as enemies. There are people who are your enemies. You know that. There are people, I think, who disagree on this and who we need to talk with more, and we all need to educate ourselves more, who are not. I was sure my time had run out, but...
I was sitting here with Phoebe.
Oh, that was what that meant?
You don't look at me.
I'll just jump in. I don't project the same as Josh, so we might need to put on the volume a little bit more. There are a few things I want to start with. One of them is that about 80% of what you said I agree with, maybe even 90%. The parts of it that I disagree with are actually quite fundamental. One of them is that my responses are as if my family is under attack. There's no as if. As of 6 hours ago, 142 missiles were fired at my sister, and my brother-in-law, and my mother-in-law, and my nieces and nephews. When I say that, telling you the number of missiles that were fired by Hamas at all of Israel, not part of it, I do not erase the Palestinians who have been killed. I speak about my closest family first and my cousins second. My humanism is in no way diminished by my ache for my family to be safe. My sister in Tel Aviv is under attack. 142 missiles, the second Hamas pulled out of the ceasefire talks that everyone at the table agreed with. The Palestinian Authority agreed with, Egypt agreed with, America agreed with, Israel agreed with, and as soon as Hamas decided that its interests weren't being met by any compromise, 142 missiles were fired at my sister. So there's no as if. But the other part of it that I want to respond to is that that is not a lack of rationality. There is a tribal, primal tiger response that is coming from me when my sister is under attack. No doubt and no apologies. It is also a rational description to talk about that many missiles being fired from a terrorist group who are not just bad people. It is a terrorist group that built terror tunnels under their own population and under Israeli settlements and kindergartens and hospitals with the intent to commit mass murder. And just 2 days ago, it became known that Hamas had been plotting a coup against Fatah, meaning Hamas was planning to execute the Palestinian Authority's leadership. In fact, something I hadn't shared in the first conversation was when I was in Israel a month ago, I was supposed to introduce Shalom, who had been the Palestinian Prime Minister. Now, what you need to know about Salam Fayyad is everybody, except Hamas, loved Salam Fayyad. But when I say love, that still only meant 3% of the population supporting his work when he was Prime Minister, and because he was so good, he got up to 6%. But he was called by the Israeli leadership the Palestinian David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion created the institutions of the state before there was such a thing as the State of Israel, and Salam Fayyad was creating the institutions for Palestine before there would be a formal recognition of Palestine. Now, the reason why I bring him into it is because the notion that it is irrationality that leads me to be as rageful, and I am full of rage at Hamas, that is also based in fact. The facts on and under the ground, no one's disagreeing with. No one is disagreeing that Hamas is plotting mass murder of its own people and of Israelis. No one is questioning whether or not there is tremendous, tremendous global anti-Semitism connected with much of the protests against Israel. But the part of that I also want to point out is I don't believe that conversation is being stifled. In fact, as I said last week, the claim that I am trying to negate the Jewish validity of a critical voice of Israel is belied by the fact that I invited us to do this. And I invited us not just to have Ari Shabib, but also Peter Weinheimer as required reading. It is, I think, emphatically true and clear here and elsewhere that the conversation is thriving as long as people are brave enough to have it. We need to just have the conversation instead of talking about wishing we could. And I think that is a very, very big difference in the way that I want to frame our conversation, as opposed to the way that you did. And as to AIPAC, I think it's important to recognize that AIPAC's responsibility, as it sees itself, as its mission defines it, is to strengthen the alliance between the United States and Israel. And that means that its job is to keep American support for things like Iron Dome, which is a defense system that saved my life and millions of other people who are under constant threat, right? To keep that support going. When I met with Congresswoman Barbara Lee yesterday, right, while we were talking about this, and while we're talking about how hard it is as progressive American leaders to defend Israel, how hard it is because our constituencies don't understand it. How is it possible that you, a civil rights activist, you, a marriage equality activist, you, going to Congress together to lobby for tax reform, all these progressive values, how is it possible that you, let's use Barbara Lee instead of a faith leader, you, how could you support Iron Dome funding from the government, from the US government? She says, they don't understand. She says, there has to be a way forward. We cannot keep this impasse. That's what we were talking about last week. But the progressive values that Israel embodies imperfectly is AIPAC's job to protect, so that the internal democracy of Israel can actually be mature and strengthened enough to heal its own internal fissures. Peace is only possible with justice, right? No justice, no peace. We know this. You don't have to be tuned into Ferguson to hear this chant in your heart. Right? But the savvy of many of the organizers on the ground here when it comes to progressive values resonate with Ferguson, and in fact, the racism that is rampant in Ferguson and throughout the United States, because #OneTown does not actually address racism in the United States and the Voting Rights Act being totally undermined, right? So those who are right now in Oakland and Berkeley and anywhere, Amherst, I'm thinking like the paradigmatic place in the United States where there is a very strong progressive presence, right? the understanding that Israel actually is a democracy where there are no democracies, where Israel is GLBT friendly, where marriage equality is present, and where the armed forces are integrated. These democratic progressive values are very much on the ground. So I don't presume that someone who's critical of Israel is anti-Semitic. I don't. There's a difference between being critical of Israel and being anti-Zionist. Those two are starkly in contrast. The difference between anti-Zionism and a critical Zionism is very marked. Not just in the content of what we say, but in the tenor of what we say. And so what I want to say in response to you, and this could maybe be a spark for our conversation, is you want to be a part of fixing this? Call yourself a Zionist, a critical, dissatisfied Zionist. You love Israel, and Israel is far from perfect. But what I would say is that one of the areas in which I take greatest issue in the way that you just presented is not only and I continue to believe it's a strong man who's holding back the conversation because we're having it. And there's no question that there are parts of I'll just say, the right-wing part of any establishment that hates dissent. Be that Jewish, be that Tea Party, be that any ossified group that has existed long enough to gain baggage. The ossified part, which would define itself as the traditionalists, the conservatives, whatever, hate dissent and call that being a traitor. Right? So I'd like to point to them as a universal problem. That doesn't equal Zionism, that doesn't equal AIPAC, that equals a significant part and a decent donor base, as you pointed out, from an organization that is trying to do what I consider to be noble work. It is a very big problem, I imagine, for professionals to hold back their donors from mouthing off. And I think there's a significant difference as well between extreme rightist Israelis who speak in terrible ways about Arabs, who speak in terrible ways about Palestinians, who speak in terrible ways about non-Orthodox Jews. There's a significant difference between them and people who will send a missile to kill other people. The extremists in Israel should be brought to justice, including the murderers of Muhammad Abu Khdir. They burned him to death. Jewish terrorists burned a Palestinian teen to death. And Israel, everywhere in Israel, condemned them as Jewish terrorists. The global Jewish response was, they were Jewish terrorists who did not act in our name, and we have the responsibility to do a cheshbon hanefesh, an internal accounting of our own souls, because as Yossi Klein Halevi, the author of a book called Like Dreamers, said, we can no longer claim that we don't do that. Because yes, we do. And just when the media in Israel was starting to do this kind of critical self-reflection, Hamas started sending missiles. That was right when I arrived. But if you look at the difference between the revenge murder perpetrated by those Israeli Jewish extremists, those Israeli Jewish terrorists, and the response by the establishment, by the communities, and by the global Jewish people, in comparison with the Palestinian terrorists who we found out this morning were authorized by Hamas to kidnap 3 Jewish teens and murder them, the kidnapped teens, Ayal, Naphtali, and Gilad. When it was found that the Jewish teens were dead, the Palestinian Authority, not just Hamas, handed out sweets and celebrated. And they morphed the World Cup insignia with a hand holding the soccer ball to this. Actually, it was these 3 fingers. These 3 fingers, this became a salute on Palestinian Authority television of pride. Now, I do not point to Palestinian people and say they are that, but I do say that the leadership resembles that. And the Jewish response within Israel, which is critical of its own extremism, is worthy of defense, is worthy of applause, is worthy of someone like you, of incredible moral caliber, saying, I'm a Zionist who will fight for Israel to be better than it is. Which is why the New Israel Fund slogan is one that I think should resonate with so many people's hearts. Say yes to a better Israel. It's not good enough yet. It is far from good enough yet. It has had 66 years to perfect a union during which there have been countless terrorist attacks and at least 5 wars. During that, it has established a democratic institutional world. Far from perfect. Elements of it concern me as a Zionist right now. But the idea that an anti-Zionist is an anti-Semite doesn't feel so strange to me. A critical Zionist is certainly not an anti-Semite. But an anti-Zionist is pointing at the illegitimacy of my home, my Jewish home that has Muslim and Christian and Jewish citizens, and Bedouin and Druzim, who are not equally protected under the law yet. But that doesn't mean that the law doesn't aim to equally protect them. There is a perfection of the union, as it were, in Israel that just hasn't happened yet. And I think it calls for a patriotism in the parts of Jewish hearts. And when someone attacks Israel, they are attacking my family. They are attacking your family. When they are criticizing Israel, they are not attacking Israel. And that distinction is incredibly important and lost many times because the coalitions in the United States and around the world that are critical of Israel, those who are most passionate in their criticism of Israel, and by criticism I mean blocking Israeli shipments from the port of Oakland this week, do so in the name of justice, but are breaking the law. They are breaking the law. Now, passive resistance, fine. But if you actually knew that it was a labor dispute that part of the union was taking advantage of in order to, in that moment, block an Israeli shipment, and the mayor of Oakland, who doesn't want to lose the election, didn't step forward to stop her constituents, right? It is much more complicated than justice for Palestine. It is much more complicated than that. And to draw with clear distinctions that one position is progressive and one is not, is to absolutely defame Zionism, which it does not deserve. Is it perfect? No. Is it worthy? Absolutely. Is it in need? Just read Deborah Lipstack's op-ed in today's New York Times called "Why the Jews Are Worried."
So, I think one thing that I actually don't feel, sometimes when you said that you were disagreeing with me, I didn't feel that I had said something that you were disagreeing with. This is the thing, though, that I really think is sort of at the heart of it, or at least the thing that really speaks out to me, is this. You, I believe, are conflating supporting Israel with supporting Israel's government. Or at least, that seems to be what you're doing. And to me, that is in fact the crux of my problem, the crux of the issue and the challenge for me. I am an American. If the American government decides to go in and attack and invade Iraq or invade Vietnam, I can disagree with that. I'm still not anti-American. I can be called and have been called anti-American, but I am not anti-American. By the same token, if the Israeli government is doing something that is in fact not leading to peace, that is in fact going away from peace, if it's doing that, then to support the Israeli government is in fact not to support Israel, but quite the reverse.
So the gathering of those who would, and did, and do, criticize the American invasion into Vietnam and into Iraq and Afghanistan, they were done with American flags. I hold my American flag and my patriotism dear when I criticize my government for doing the wrong thing. Do you hold an Israeli flag when you say Israel's doing wrong? That is actually a really good litmus test.
And I think that's an excellent point, and I really take your point. And I started to speak about it last week, and I feel it about it too. It is not enough to, I have learned, just recently even, thinking, it is not enough to be critical, but it also, I must show the support for what I support. So this is what I support. I support the Israeli people. I support the Palestinian people. I, in fact, do not privilege the Israeli people over the Palestinian people. We've had this conversation. I just don't. Although I feel more connected with Israel because I'm a Jew, but I'm a humanist. That's what I am. And so, for me, and I know you are a humanist too when you talk about different nuances and just your family or your cousins and things like that. But for me, this is the issue. Is, okay, I love Israel now. I love Israel. I want Israel to have peace, and I want the Palestinians to have peace, if it's possible, or as much peace as can be gotten, right? So my take on the Israeli government, on the Netanyahu type government, and my take on is that a lot of times I just really disagree with them. It's not like I'm super knowledgeable, but I really just disagree, and then it seems to me like they're actually building more sort of rah-rah sort of war stuff sometimes. Like they're just sort of, and then they expect the American Jews to go, yeah, whatever you do is great.
Except that there were 10,000 Israelis, Jews and Arabs, I have to assume that it wasn't only Jewish, that rallied in Tel Aviv for peace last week.
Yes, and that was great, and I was proud of it.
And so then one of the questions is, how do you get involved? How does someone who work toward peace in a way that you don't believe, and actually I'm not convinced either, that the Netanyahu government has been leading toward peace with that intent, right? And given, and if you don't know the history, if you don't know the current coalition, there might not be an ultra-Orthodox party as part of the coalition for the first time in decades, but there are right-wing elements of Likud, which is a center-right, not exactly center, that's how they call themselves, but a right-wing government. And there's Israel Beitenu, and there are really, I find, problematic rightist elements within the Israeli government. So someone who disagrees with them, how do you align yourself with the Israelis who are working towards correcting their government's decisions?
Right.
And I think that is very, very different than not believing those very parties who are critical of the coalition when those parties are speaking in support of Israel's defensive tactics. Those parties on the left in Israel are currently supporting Israel's defensive strategy. Not happy with everything, and let me say, because when I say, God forbid, these words are just disgusting words. So how do we speak about human beings who are slaughtered unintentionally as collateral damage? There is nothing right about these words. And no words I'm going to say are going to come out right, because these are human beings, the images of God, each one of them, who have been killed during war. And for me to know, to my heart, that it's Hamas's fault for putting people in mortal danger over and over and over and firing missiles from populated areas, right? For me to look at that and to feel okay, as one Berkeley journalist recently said, there are some people like Rabbi Menachem Creditor who think that what's happening in Gaza is okay.
That was disgusting.
It was disgusting because I'm a moral human being. And
Bad writing, too.
it was terrible writing, but worse than the writing was the aspersion. Worse than the writing was the insult to my humanity. And worse even than that was the erasure of those Palestinian lives as being a talking point against the Zionists.
So if I may, and I just realized I was yelling, I'm sorry again, I'm making you guys go deaf, sorry. This should be taken away from me. I'll just hold it like this. So, yes, taking you up on that, how do we support, how do we engage critically, I believe is the term. How do we engage critically together, all of us who want justice, all of us who want justice for everyone? Now, how do we do that? What are the mechanisms by which we can? And just one thing I just also want to interject is that for me, in the dialogue, sometimes when you're talking about, which is absolutely true, Hamas started this and that they launched stuff like that. But also for me, I mean, we visited the territories. I know it's sort of over your total reluctance, but we made you on our trip. But we visited with a settler, our group that went to Israel, me and my family, you and your family, and a bunch of other people. And the context gets lost. To me, the context is that, wait, here in the West Bank, that's occupied territory. Over there in Gaza, it's whatever it is. It's, you can contend about whether, it's not occupied, they went through, but then there's blockades. It gets really complex. Basically, you have a whole lot of people who are living horribly. Okay, and when those people are living horribly, they are gonna want an outlet. If I'm living horribly, it's gonna take an incredible amount of super powerful DNA from Martin Luther King for me to go, yes, I have no agency, and I wish for this, and I hope for peace.
If you aren't following Pastor Michael McBride from across the street, on Twitter, on Facebook, and in his life, you're missing a hero that fits this description. The reason why I bring him into the room is, number one, I miss him. He's in Ferguson right now. And the issue of the scourge of racism in the United States is actually a really, really decent way, I hate that sentence, to point to not a fix, but what would be a step forward. So let me point to what I wish were, and then perhaps make a suggestion in response to your question, which I think is profoundly important and might actually shift the tide of the conversation that we as Americans have when it comes to our discontent with Israel, right? And I would hope that when we speak our discontent with Israel, we also speak our discontent with Hamas, right? You don't have to speak your discontent with the Palestinian Authority, though I have plenty of my own. But when we only voice criticism of Israel and we don't acknowledge the context in which it faces, which at the very least is complicated, and that has no moral judgment, though I think there's plenty do. So, what Pastor McBride is doing, along with a group called the PICO Network, and if you aren't part of their network, please become part of them. It's a national organizing faith-based network of which Netivot, Shalom, and other Berkeley communities are a part. Right? They are on the ground as leaders within the African American community, channeling the rage that is incredibly legitimate, and talking about building this world. Now, are they being given a chance? Not at all. Is the police department and the authorities right now in Missouri actually solving anything? I just don't think so. I'm not on the ground, but from everything I can see, and I'm paying close attention, it seems to me that the rage is deeply legitimate. The factors have absolutely contributed towards their degradation, and rage and violence could be understood, but that does not mean it can be condoned. And the heroism of civil rights activism historically in the United States has been the choice, the very tortured choice that I have no right to speak about except in admiration, right, to change this world by nonviolent resistance, by nonviolent activism. That has not been attempted from within the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. And so when we talk about trying to change that from Israel's standpoint, the problem, as Ari Shavi points out, and as Beinart points out in his book, however reluctantly, is that there is an absolutely credible suspicion on the part of Israel and the world that if given the space, Hamas will rear its head, and if not Hamas, then ISIS, and if not ISIS, then ISIL, and if not ISIL, then Al-Qaeda. Right? This is actually the truth on the ground in Gaza, and its extremism, its terrorism is very different from the extremism that rears its head in Israel. I would say, however painfully, that is because Israel has a self-corrective democratic element. It's not perfect. So when you say, what can we do to make a difference? I would say our responsibility is to support groups like the New Israel Fund, which is on the ground supporting non-government organizations, NGOs, in Israel that support Arabs and Jews and Palestinians and Christians. And you can find their website here. If you're looking for other places, I just listed them because this is a place that I wish progressive Americans would send all of their efforts. If you have capacity, send them money. If you have time, go. Get on the ground. See the injustices in Israel when it comes to the non-democratic elements in Israel and fix them. That's our job. But to second guess Israel's government's response in a moment of threat, it's not to say that I'm happy with their responses to the threat, that I'm happy that the United States has to help fund an Iron Dome missile system, that I'm happy about any of the violence that is taking place in Israel, or that I'm happy about settler groups that are dispossessing Arab settlements, Arab communities right now. I'm unhappy about all of that, but that is different than Israel's military response to terrorism. The democratic elements of Israel are meant to fix this. So what can we do? Go to nif.org for New Israel Fund. Go to handandhayk12.org, which is a center for Jewish Arab education in Israel, being led by a member of our shul who made Aliyah years ago named Rebecca Bardak. She was actually the director of the Jewish a cappella group that sparked me to become a rabbi. She is leading not just fundraising activities, but it is a framework with 5 schools within Israel for Jews and Arabs to come together, to learn each other's narratives, and to build the world. There are lots of other places I've listed, but if you want to fix Israel in the way that you think it is broken, you're probably not wrong, and that effort is better directed towards fixing Israel instead of criticizing its responses that are just as imperfect as its democracy, but just as needed. And I think that is a very different framework. It is not a blank check. It is not unconditional blind support for an administration, because God forbid George Bush had gotten more votes than Al Gore, I still would have been an American. Right, by the way, that was a joke. And my threat to move to Canada didn't come to fruition, and I was ashamed of many of the decisions of my country, and I worked towards changing things, and I wish I were still hopeful about every element of them moving forward now. But my point is, if you want to fix what is broken, fix it. Point to it with rage. Just as much rage as I have at the threat, those are all threats. So what I would say is, the narrative that many of the progressive American Jewish community have, that there's no place for their activism, has been absolutely wrong the entire time. They've been absolutely right. We have been absolutely right that there are members of our community on the right who don't want to hear disagreement. But let's just forget those people. If AIPAC isn't going to feel like an inviting environment for you, which, by the way, I'm on the board of Northern California AIPAC, you're invited. Come voice your discontent. Come to anything. Meet with our staff. Say how you wish we would change. Say how you wish Israel were different. We're open to it. We need to be together in order for Israel to be Israel. A vibrant democracy doesn't only have people on one side. But if that's not going to work for you, fine. Get involved with an organization that supports the elements of Israel and democracy and peacemaking that you believe. We as a community have hosted Shalom. That sound was a missile fired into Israel. If you have the Tzeva Adom, the Red Alert app on your phone, it goes off, and you know when a missile is being fired. The missile is just fired. And despite that, get involved with human rights organizations like B'Tselem. Get involved with other organizations in the United States and in Israel that are trying to end war. I believe Israel is trying to end war and is in an impossible moral situation. You don't have to agree with me to be right. But the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is very fickle to me. Critical Zionism, I get. Anti-Zionism, I don't get.
So, I agree with you on a lot of that stuff. There was a moment, and there are moments, when you use a phrase like, but to second guess. But to second guess is wrong, and you say it
when Israel's leftist political parties are not second guessing it. They are not part of the coalition. They were not part of the decision. They lobby against violence, against military responses.
But
I have to trust the democracy of Israel has the voice that you have.
But why can't I believe what I believe to be the truth and articulate that?
You can certainly believe it to be the truth. My point is that if it isn't from a place of knowledge, and as you said, a place of intuition, a place of moral outrage, which is legitimate. It is a human right, certainly not just free speech, but within what it is to be alive. But to do it without the knowledge, and you aren't doing it, you said yourself, you're not doing it from a place of knowledge, you're doing it from a place of moral reaction, which is of course legitimate. That is where a lot of my activism comes from too. But there's a difference between the liberal peacenik parties in Israel understanding the necessity of the response, because they are under fire and understand not from a place only of emotion, but history, what is needed.
But I will say this, and this is a problem also with having come up through comedy, is that there's, and especially a Jewish trope of the Jewish community of self-denigration. You sort of put yourself down, and that's like the thing. It's like, oh, I have zero now? I just started.
The collective.
Oh, it's a collective zero.
Yeah, well, because you have a collective time limit.
But okay, so because people need to do
He
that.
ran through more of it than you did, to be fair.
Yeah. But okay, so let me just I think make like around 3 points. Each of which will take 10 seconds. Not including this pause. Okay, I think I put myself down too much. Yes, I don't know as much as you do about Israel, but I've been reading a shitload, right? I've been reading stuff you recommended, and I've been reading other stuff, and I read stuff on both sides, and I read stuff that is by Sharansky, who like freaks me out sometimes, and I've read stuff by people who I will wait to learn to disagree. I will say, okay, prove me wrong. So let me just say this. I'm not speaking just totally, as you know, just totally like from the gut, from some sort of impulse or something like that. And there is a level in this argument, there is a point at which sometimes is invoked secret knowledge, special knowledge, more knowledge, and that only Josh, or you Joshites, if you had the knowledge, if you knew, if you were actually privy to all the things, if you read the Jerusalem Post every day, if you did that in Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, then you would know. Then you would know, but otherwise you don't know. So yes, I do need to know more, and I do need to learn more. But also, I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing, and I think that people, so I want to say that's one more thing, one more thing is this. I will submit to you, and this is where we disagree as well, and we disagree, I think, in our trajectories, even though we're both from Long Island. Although you spend more time there. I'm sorry, that was a horrible thing to say. But you are saying, I think I'm not ceding the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic parallel. I'm not ceding that. I think a lot of it is. I don't think all of it is. I think it is possible. I read a dialogue posted by J Street, I read a dialogue posted on Facebook by J Street, a dialogue between Michael Oren, and his best friend from Jersey, his old best friend from Jersey, who is the editor of the Financial Times or something like that, who is not a Zionist, who is very thoughtful, who loves, I think he loves a lot of things about Israel. He says, I am not a Zionist. I would say I am a Zionist. I'm coming out. I Josh am. But it is possible, I think it's possible not to be a Zionist and to be a Jew. I also think that it is possible to be, this is my last thing. It's just really important, I think. Some people are Jewish in different ways. People are people in different ways. Some Jews are being the best Jewish self they can be from things that they have learned in shul and elsewhere, by going and supporting and devoting themselves to supporting Palestinians and Palestinian rights. Those people, I would submit, are just as Jewish. What you're saying, and I take your point from me, I'm taking responsibility myself. I feel that I am responsible for stating clearly and repeatedly that I support the state of Israel, that I love the state of Israel, that I want Israel to become what its Declaration of Independence promised it might be. I say those things, and I also say I equally love the Palestinians.
What we're going to do is we're going to have an opportunity for you to speak to each other. Chavruta is the way that Jews have traditionally learned, which is really to be brave enough to look each other in the eye. Josh and I will each cede some of our time at the end of our conversation so that you can have more of what we promised you would have. I will not offer a rejoinder, though I have plenty to say in response to Josh.
I think basically you don't have anything to say to that. I won. I think that.
Take the next 20 minutes, meet your neighbor. If you came in with them, they might not be the person for you to speak to. But look them in the eye and talk about what you want to talk about. State your own heart's concerns. 20 minutes.
Bring the settlements back, have huge international support, both militarily for peace and security, for Israel's security and Palestinian security, and also incredible financial incentives wherever they can be provided. Have a thriving West Bank, that is not occupied, and that's like the most. And then everyone else goes, wow, that's really cool. We'd like to do that. And so that's what I'd be. So that's what I'm for. I just want to say that's what I'm for. And also, Manako was asking me, would I really like join AIPAC? And I really would. Just one, it'd be a great story. But two, but two, because it's really important and they're super powerful. We were in Washington. You say AIPAC and people just doors open. I mean, everything. People just bow down to you. Like Pelosi. It's amazingly powerful. I guess maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but I guess we all know it. Hey, how come they stop videotaping? But in any case, he's back there. Oh, you're getting different angles, you cinema guy. Okay. So anyhow, thank you all for this. And now and that's all I have to say except, hey.
Hi, everybody. So here's what I want to do. Number one is I want to take responsibility for not beginning the evening the way I did last time, which is saying there's no applause. But some of you applauded at some of the things that one of us said. And one of you hissed the way we do at the name Haman when someone said something too. That is not a dialogue. And I will not end this conversation by saying that was fine. It was not fine. And there is an absolute inclination on the part of any group who sort of knows where its heart lies to acclaim and to gather with some sort of out loud feeling or verve when something it supports is said. That's not a dialogue. And if we're going to have a conversation about the thorniest issues in our community, of which Israel should not be one of them, what should be one of them is the homeless people downtown Berkeley. What should be one of them is the incredible gun violence in Oakland. What should be one of them is the interfaith alliance that leads to bettering the education so that there isn't such an achievement gap, instead of founding charter schools. There are amazingly important priorities in our community, and hissing at a group that one of you doesn't like shuts down the very thing that we set out to do. And as you hissed, my alarm went off again in the south of Israel. So if you hiss, I hope that you would applaud when that missile gets intercepted by Iron Dome. And I'd like to end with some sort of hopeful statement, but I am stuck in a reality where a missile just was sent at my family again. Now, I love my friend Josh, and we agree about more than about which we disagree. That will not change, and even if it does change, I love you unconditionally. And our community is a place that nurtures conversation, passionate, disagreeing, philosophical conversation. Yes, I have a very strong set of opinions about almost everything. And I'm the rabbi of the shul, so my voice is louder. That's just how it goes, and it's very hard. If I step so far away from the community's consensus, I probably won't be the rabbi anymore. But the fact that I am the rabbi for my 8th year means that there's a place for my voice, even if it isn't everyone's opinion. And so one of the things that I would ask you to do is not suddenly agree with me, because that's not what I'm saying, but don't hiss when someone disagrees with you. That is, or agrees with you. Don't applaud at someone else's expense. That is not a conversation. So I want to end with a statement about hope, and it's going to be a very Jewish statement about hope, because it doesn't sound very hopeful. The national anthem that was chosen for Israel is called Hatikva, the hope. Doesn't that sound great? Doesn't it sound completely uplifting and optimistic? Except if you look at the words, the line that says Hatikva, the hope, says Od lo avda tikvatenu. We still haven't lost our hope. Just take that in. What kind of a national anthem is that? We still haven't lost our hope. The answer is, that is the story of a beleaguered people who through millennia have been assaulted one time after another by groups that cannot be lined up as the same. But through the vagaries of history, things do repeat. What is our hope? Our hope is to be a free people in our land, which does not preclude Palestinians being a free people in their own land next to us. But I have to tell you that when facing the reality on the political ground, not only in Gaza, and not only in Hamas, but there's a unity government, and I am pained at what its unified reactions have been to Israel. Its actions have been toward Israel. It is very hard to deal with that and retain hope. So what is my hope right now? My hope right now is for everyone just to stop. Everyone just stop. Stop sending missiles, stop hissing, stop murdering each other, stop defending yourself at someone else's life's expense. Just stop. I know that doesn't sound very hopeful, but to be honest, this world of ours is on fire right now. And if we'd all just stop, it would inevitably be a step toward peace. So we could take actions, but I would ask you, just stop. Find a way to listen more than you speak. I'm working on that, and it is hard for me. If it's hard for me, it's hard for you. It is hard to listen. Please listen, not just to your own anger because of your political commitments. I'm saying this to myself. Please don't only listen to the alarms that tell you when someone was violent to someone else. Just stop. Because then we could actually cry finally because we had the air to do so. Everyone has a lot of crying to do. Everyone deserves to live. In this community, that's going to take a lot of bravery so that our conversations exclude hissing.
exclude applause. Because when you're really in pain, you're not hissing. When you're really in pain, you're not applauding. And everybody should be in pain right now. Only those who are willing to sit in that pain can claim to have a hope worth pursuing. So I pray that all of us have our deepest dreams realized tonight. If not tonight, tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the day after. Because a great Jewish saying says, though the Messiah hasn't yet come, I will wait. Let's wait actively and without judging each other while we each wait with all of our hearts. Thank you for coming to a very, very intense and important conversation. We did not end it, we didn't even touch the surface of it, but we have started sharing our hearts. Please, as you're leaving, look at the person with whom you spoke, remember their name, find them for coffee, and talk to each other. Good evening, everyone.